So welcome to the National Conference on Women in Economics. I am honored to be asked to speak here, and I'm very, very pleased that the UW-Madison Women in Economics group is hosting the national conference this morning. Virtually welcome all of you to UW-Madison. All of you have to come visit in person at some time soon. So I was an undergraduate economics major. I went to my local university, which was the University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities. I didn't know what I was going to major in when I arrived, but it became very clear that I just loved social science. I was really interested in those questions about how people interacted with each other, and in turn, how government policy and the economy worked together. And that pretty much made me an economics major. In addition, of course, economics allowed me to use some of my mathematical and technical skills. And one of the things I loved about economics was that I could actually think about it in an organized way, that there were these models and you could use mathematics and come up with outcomes by doing that. I found that a rigorous way of thinking about some of these social science questions that the other disciplines didn't offer. Well, I assumed I was going to go on in business. I took a job working for 3 years for an economic consulting firm in Chicago. And, it didn't take very long of thinking about this until I decided that what I really wanted to do was go get a PhD in economics. So I went to MIT, which I will claim is the best economics graduate program in the country. It certainly was for me. It was a wonderful experience, a great group of faculty. And came out of there and charted a career as a typical academic. I did a lot of research, I did a lot of teaching, and I loved doing that. I was looking at labor markets, I was looking at issues of inequality and poverty, and I must say this was before anyone else was talking about inequality. I actually was advised by one of the faculty at MIT when I was a graduate student to stay away from that inequality topic because no one cares about that outside of Europe. The world has changed on that one a little bit. And I was very interested in looking at the impact of government policy and how government policies interacted with people's behavior. While I was going about being an academic, I became more and more involved with various types of administrative work. And I was at Northwestern University sort of after I got tenure, and was running a rather large research institute, had a lot of outside money that I'd been able to raise, and was feeling very good about life. I'd gotten married. I had a baby, things were good. And I got a call to go work in the Clinton administration. And my first thought was, no, I'm very busy. I've got a young child. I'm not interested. But fortunately, they didn't let me say no too quickly. And I went to the Clinton administration, and I was a member of the Council of Economic Advisors. And one of the advantages of being an economist is that there are a lot of options out there, particularly in government service, for people to move in for a couple of years and then go out again, particularly if you've got something of a reputation in economics. And the Council of Economic Advisors is one of the best of these. It's the in-house advisory group to the White House on economic issues. There are 3 members of the council who at that time were Senate approved and appointed. And then there are a number of junior people. And I'd actually spent a year as a junior person at the council earlier. But I was invited to come back as one of the members. The chair of the council at that point was a woman named Janet Yellen, who I suspect many of you have heard of more recently. She's the current Secretary of the Treasury. I spent 2 years basically working on anything that came across my desk, because you can't be a specialist when you're, covering the whole economy and the whole world in the White House. And, a fascinating experience of really learning policy, seeing up close how the White House worked, working with a whole different group of people than you interact with in the academic world. Well, by the time I left that job, I was a little less interested in going back to being just an academic. And I took a job as a dean of the public policy program at the University of Michigan, the Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy, and spent 8 years in that job. It was a wonderful job. I loved the University of Michigan. I was able to grow the school. It was a relatively new school. We grew faculty, we grew programs, we initiated a PhD program, we started an undergraduate program. It was a wonderful time. And after 8 years, I was sort of looking for something new, I have to admit, getting a little bored with that. And the Obama administration came along. And I moved into a job in the US Department of Commerce as the Undersecretary for Economic Affairs. And this is 2000 and and the US economy is turning into the biggest recession anyone has seen since the 1930s. And the attraction of saying, if ever you're going to go into government service to work on economic issues, where sort of the sense of the country needs you, this is the time to do it. So I went into the Department of Commerce. I sort of was their primary economic person there, did some work with a lot of the things going on in the White House. I was also overseeing the two big economics data agencies, the Bureau of the Census and the Bureau of Economic Analysis, which put out virtually all of the data that we look at. And of course, it was 2009. We were moving into the 2010 census. And I will say, working with the 2010 census, this nationwide mobilization of trying to count every single person was one of the most fascinating experiences I've ever had in my life. Well, we got through the 2010 census, and I got asked if I would move into the deputy secretary job at Commerce. Deputy secretary is the chief operating officer of the department. Department of Commerce is a $10 billion organization, about 50 million employees, 50,000 employees. And, that was, so then you're running all the different functions in Commerce. And that includes everything from the patent office to NOAA, the group that oversees coastal and water and air issues. You're, in addition to the data agencies, the whole trade organization is in Commerce. So, that was just fascinating. And then while I was deputy secretary, for a variety of reasons having little to do with me, the secretary moved on, and I ended up spending over a year as the acting secretary of Commerce. And I will tell you, it's just a great honor to be in anyone's cabinet in Washington, D.C., but particularly in President Obama's cabinet. I was very honored to be in that job. So I spent 4 years in the Obama administration, and at that point had been there longer than I expected, and was looking around and started looking at other jobs and ended up here at the University of Wisconsin as chancellor. And indeed, I always knew I was going back to a university, and coming back to an absolutely great public university here in Wisconsin was a wonderful thing to do. And it's been a great adventure here as well. But let me tell you that while I have spent much of the last 10 years in Commerce and here at Wisconsin, not really being an economist anymore, being an administrator and an organizational leader, what I learned in economics was absolutely vital for me. Economics makes you very numerate, right? You know how to read budgets, you know how to look at data, you know how to think about metrics. It's incredibly important in these jobs. Economics gives you a way of organized thinking. It teaches you a set of models. And even if those models don't describe the world very well at times, it gives you a way to think about how things interact. There are a series of concepts in economics that I will say I use almost daily in this job. Opportunity cost. If you do one thing, you can't do another, and you got to think hard about the trade-offs. Incentives. Moral hazard. If you want people to do something, line up the incentives right. Don't ask them to do something when the incentives for them are all set up in the other direction. Or thirdly, simply unexpected consequences. And when you think inside models in economics, it's very clear you can't change one thing without it affecting everything else. And all too often in discussions of policy, or whether inside an organization or at the national, federal level, people want to change this one thing and think everything else is going to stay the same. And of course, that's not the way it works. And economics gives you some really useful, complex ways to think about both organizations and policy. And that's been highly, highly useful to me. So you're all women in economics, and there's been a lot of publicity in recent years about the problems of women in economics. And I'm not going to say that that publicity is wrong. I can tell you a lot of stories, which, at some point you just got to let roll off your back and say, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to ignore these guys. That's not everyone, but it does happen. It happens to women in every field. Economics is still more predominantly a male discipline than any other areas. But let me give you two pieces of advice. Advice number one, if you love economics, stay with it. It is worth it. And there are so many different things to do with an economics degree, whether you go on for a master's or whether you go on for a PhD. I went the academic route, and I certainly do not regret that. It's a wonderful way to interact with students, to do some really interesting research. And I always found that combination of teaching, which was a very immediate, rewarding, immediate response type thing, with research, which is a very long-term enterprise without a lot of immediate feedback, that those two together was just a very rewarding and exciting job. And I'm constantly interested in economic problems. I haven't lost that. In their days, I think, gee, that would really be a great research project, and I don't have time to go do it right now. But even if you aren't interested in that type of a position, there are a lot of other policy-related jobs, either in government, in near government organizations like the Federal Reserve Board, various development banks, international organizations, the UN, all sorts of state and local places. There's a lot of options in the policy world. And then, of course, there's a large number of options in the business world, because the things you learn in economics, even if you go to business and are not just in an economics position, will put you in good stead. So, I'm a big proponent of people's training in economics and the many, many ways in which you can use it, either staying in the field of economics or moving on into other things. My second piece of advice, economics gives you a set of habits of mind. It trains you in a way that you will find useful. It tells you how to ask questions. If I do this, what will I not be able to do? If I do this, what other things will be affected? How do things interact with each other? What's the model of how these things fit together? That type of training is really valuable no matter where you go. It trains you in how to analyze evidence, how to think about data, how to present data, how to make arguments with data. I promise you that will be valuable to you your entire life. And just generally how to think clearly about problems. And, when I was at the Council of Economic Advisors in the Clinton administration, working with Janet Yellen, one reason why I'm not in the least surprised that she has had the career that she's had is she was just absolutely marvelous. When something would happen and we'd be sitting down together at the end of the day and sort of saying, gosh, what do you think about that? And how should we start responding? She would grab a piece of paper and just off the top of her head, she would write out a model and say, let's think about it this way. And she's one of the clearest, cleanest thinkers that I've ever worked with. And, that's her economics training. And she's going to be a great Treasury Secretary. I'm really, really pleased that she's been called into that position. In any case, I will tell you that economics has been a great background and profession for me. I hope that it will do the same for many of you. And even if you do decide to go on into law school or business school or something else, the things that you learn in your undergraduate degrees will always be helpful to you. So I wish you the best. I hope that whatever you do and wherever you go, that the economics training that you're getting right now, stays with you and helps you, whether it's just reading the newspaper or whether it's in the type of job that you're doing and the questions that you have to ask. So thank you for asking me here today. I've been asked to introduce the next speaker, and it's really my honor to introduce Fanta Traore. 3 years ago, Fanta co-founded the Sadie Collective, named for Dr. Sadie T.M. Alexander, who in 1921 became the first African-American to earn a PhD in economics, but was prevented from working in the profession. 100 years later, Black women remain vastly underrepresented in economics, and Fanta Traore and the Sadie Collective are dedicated to changing that. Fanta holds degrees in economics and political science from Howard University. She's currently working on a joint master's degree in public policy and an MBA at Yale. She was a senior research assistant in the Federal Reserve System's International Finance Division and spent nearly a decade in the social entrepreneurship ecosystem. She's part of the World Economics Forum's Global Shaper community. She speaks 4 languages and has worked across sub-Saharan Africa to give early-stage entrepreneurs the skills and the confidence they need to successfully launch their business. Please join me in welcoming Fanta Traore.